In the previous chapter, my dear people of God, we reflected upon purifying ourselves from mortal sin by the means of gentle confession. And in this chapter, we shall recollect how we can purify ourselves from attachment to mortal sin. I would invite you to reflect with me on this topic along with St. Francis de Sales in a quadrangle question form. First of all, why do we commit the same sin again and again? Secondly, what happens once we give up sin? Thirdly, what must we do if we desire to commit ourselves to the devout life? And fourthly, what happens if we do not give up attachment to sin? Now, let us move on to the first question. Why do we commit the same sin again and again? We often think and wonder, why and how do I commit the same sin again and again in spite of making a good and meaningful confession with a proper preparation and right contrition? This is not something unique to one person, but it is the case with most of us. At this point, we start questioning if my prayer life is at stake, or have I distanced myself from God, or should I need to give more time for God's work, and so on and so forth. All these thoughts, however, cannot be 100% negated. Nevertheless, there is yet another irreparable fact, that is the attachment to sin. As for St. Francis de Sales, sin and attachment to sin are two entities, working in two different ways, yet one leading to the other, and so connected to each other. It is this attachment that causes us to sin again and again, despite the strong resolution that I shall sin no more and I shall detest every unhappy pleasure that will take me away from the love of God and neighbor. We often have the habit of looking back like the wife of Lot. When she turned and looked back, she became the pillar of salt, consumed by the rain. We look back just like her, our sinfulness, those unhappy moments, and are consumed by sin. A question might arise: is looking back at our past life wrong? As for St. Francis de Sales, looking back at our past life is not wrong, but when we look back, we begin to dwell in that, and ultimately we begin to convert it to the present life. Looking back and thinking about are two different aspects. We, in place of looking back at our past bitter life and thanking God for changing our life so beautifully, we think about the unhappy moments and pleasure, and that delve into the reality which later causes us to sin again. Hence, St. Francis advises not to think about the same again and again, as it only creates an attachment towards sin than relieves us from it. The second question: what happens once we give up sin? Regarding this, St. Francis de Sales gives the beautiful example of melons. I am going to choose another example which is more suitable to our context and the current situation. Our way of giving up sin is like the way a diabetic gives up sweets. The diabetic does not eat sweet because of the doctor's warning that eating them would mean death. But they are disturbed at having to do without them. They talk of them and try to bargain if they could possibly have them. They want at least to smell them and consider those who eat them to be fortunate. We give up sin just in this manner. Let us analyze the example of a diabetic and the sweets. At times we wonder why a diabetic is so much tempted to eat sweets. It is because, first of all, sweets are tastier and its taste is mixed into our blood, so whenever we see sweets or someone talks about it, we recollect the taste of it. That leads to the temptation of tasting it. Secondly, the attachment of the diabetic with sweets is because it has become part of his or her food habit. Therefore, I find it difficult to give up or cancel it in my menu. Thirdly, the diabetic's lack of personal conviction and determination to change his or her mind. Therefore, the patient begins justifying and arguing that it is not unhealthy to the body. Similarly, a penitent who has spent so much of time into sin and its pleasure, if wants to be detached from its clutches, then must undergo the process of dialysis and purifying the blood through the process of confession, and devote oneself to God and Him alone. After having learned what happens once we give up sin, the next question that I must answer is, what must I do if I desire to commit myself to the devout life? To begin with, I must not only turn away from sin, but from every attachment that is connected with sin and its pleasure. I must also have a strong urge to cultivate an undying spirit, failing which will push us into the death pit. To come out of it becomes impossible. It is in this manner that the true devotion consists. Unless I have a strong desire to be united with Him in spirit, without causing any disturbance by way of my attachment to sin and unhappy moments of my life, one cannot be fully devoted to Him. And so, the last question that might arise in our mind at this moment is, what happens if I do not give up my attachment to sin? To put it in a simple term, one becomes a walking corpse. He or she becomes completely lifeless, like eat without enjoyment, sleep without rest, laugh without joy, and drag themselves forcefully rather than walking. A person, so to say, is just there. That's all. There is nothing that can make that person to come to life unless he or she makes a conscious and constant effort to detach from sin. Otherwise, all the good work done by the person will be out of mere spiritual weariness and will have no meaning and cause no impact in anything. Let us therefore conclude our reflection on this chapter with a question for our personal reflection. Am I, who is cleansed by the sacrament of penance, ready to give up every attachment to sin? Or is the sacrament a mere necessity of compulsion to my devout life? Let us continue to reflect upon it. May God bless you all. Live Jesus.